Okay, coming in with breaking news for you, everybody. I yet again got into another public cancel culture-esque interaction with a celebrity because it seems like, Tucker Carlson on the set of his show caught on camera asking his actual makeup artist if women have pillow fights in the ladies' restroom. This is actually a thing. Once you see it, it can't be unseen. Okay. But like Tucker in this cringy moment, it seems like I just can't help myself. So, what actually happened? We have a lot to unpack here today, people. Okay. We're going to be moving and shaking. We're going to be meowing all over the litter box. That is this town, like Doja Cat at the Met Gala. Okay. And I know you're thinking to yourself, this has to do a little bit with the Met Gala, you'll see. And I know you're thinking, Taylor, what do I care? First of all, they made me feel poor enough. I indulge in my Fritos and Doritos and potato salad on that night, judging all these freaks. I'm done. Like, we've seen it, we've done it, we've been there. And I totally get it. However, what's unfolded here is very interesting, something I didn't expect, and something that actually speaks to what we talk about here often, right? In terms of artistry and censorship and living freely and what have you, but on Cancel Me Baby, cancel culture itself, right? So we are going to go on this journey. Anna Wintour, grab your panties, grab your glasses, because you will never be the same. So okay, so what happened? And by the way, you guys, before I go down this path, with or without said potato salad, I know these are buzzwords and things that you guys hear all the time, but Cancel Me Baby, we are rocking a one-woman show over here. And so I'm going to ask you to do the things you always hear: rate, subscribe, share, because all this shit is really important. Further, it's going to give us a fighting chance to be at the Met next year and to be there, with our Fritos, judging all these people in the flesh, and then I can report back. Okay, so it's a win-win all around, and let's make it happen. Okay, so I'm just minding my business, scrolling through all these posts, half caring, because again, I'm like, it's the Met Gala, we've seen it. I care literally more about the paint that's been cracking and drying on my wall for years. You know what I mean? So, and then I come across a post by Jamila Jamil. So you may know her. So she's an actress, but she's really become famous for speaking out about everything under the sun. You name it. If a hangnail's going the wrong way, she's going to let you know, because you can't be body shaming that hangnail. Enter Jamila. So Jamila, no happy with the Met Gala this year, because the theme was in honor of Carl. Carl, who, you ask? Not Carl in your cul-de-sac, not Carl on your soccer team, okay? Not Carl Jr. in your carpool, okay? Karl Lagerfeld, the iconic fashion designer. He died in 2019. He was 85 years old, but he is a, German, very tell it how it is. We're going to get to this, but his claim to fame was really, he's worked for Fendi, all these huge brands, but was a huge, game-changing, influential artist and designer, right? He was the creative director of Chanel for 40 years. He actually created the iconic Chanel, like the C's intertwined, which is arguably as recognizable as, the McDonald's arches, or, sorry to you, Carlos Jr., but yes. So the problem, though, because we always got to find a problem in 2023 or we're bored, right? Is that Karl Lagerfeld was also by some seen as very problematic. He was very, to me, seems like a sort of he wasn't British, but that British dry, he was German, like I said, but that kind of give no fucks, like tell it how it is. He was described as very irreverent, larger than life. But people who take issue, and we're going to dive into all these examples, say that he, again, everything under the sun, you name it, a sexist, a misogynist, a bigot, fat shamer, all these things, right? So here comes Jamila with this very thought out post on Instagram, basically calling out all of the Hollywood elite and all of these so-called feminists for being these big fat liars. Like, sorry to use the word fat, Jamila, but it is what it is. Okay, girl. So she writes this whole post basically saying, you guys are celebrating this man. And yet, like, is Me Too a thing? Like, this is where you guys look so hypocritical, basically, and where like woke leftist liberals, Hollywood, what have you, cherry pick and have selective canceling, because you guys, again, will decide out of thin air, no matter how the wind blows that day, who's canceled. And yet here you are celebrating this man in the most lavish, over the top way, who had all these problems that you claim to hate. And she says people are going to think that you are slimy and the biggest hypocrites and liars and not trust you, and go so far as to say, but this is how, deep rooted this is into our society and culture and politics. She's like, this is the kind of shit basically that will cause liberals and the left the election. And I'm sitting back like, oh shit, Jamila's onto something here, right? And let me just say, I follow her because I find her antics, while usually annoying and sometimes grifting, also like, it's like, I don't know what I'm going to get. And I can respect that she's a disruptor, a loose interpretation of that, right? But I will say, with the caveat of knowing I have actually interviewed her and met her, and I think she's a nice lady, but I also think she can be very inflammatory and overreactive to things and attention seeking, right? So needless to say, like, I think she makes problems a lot of the times out of nothing. So needless to say, I don't always agree with her, but on this, I thought, oh, you're onto something here. Yes. Because as we all know, the double standards are insane and they're very real. The things that people are canceled for are absolutely ridiculous. And she has a point. The fact that they're going around parading, celebrating this guy, again, around things that they claim to hate, just so they can get their, 15-second photo op on this red carpet. They look like a bunch of liars, right? So I write on her post and I say, I don't always agree with you, but I have to say, I think you're onto something here. And she writes me back and says, disagreement is the base of democracy, with a question mark, almost mocking me. It's like an underhanded comment, being like, well, yeah, like, newsflash, we can all disagree. Oh, good for you for getting out of your little tribe of your one note lane kind of thing. You know what I'm saying? And I write back to her and I'm like, right, I agree. Case in point. And the whole idea, right, is, again, it's like, that's my whole point. That is democracy. Great. That's why I'm like, that's exactly, you just proved my point. Usually I disagree with you. Here, I agree with you. Good times. That's the point of it all, right? It's like, cool, we can agree sometimes, we can disagree sometimes. Like, see how that works? Awesome, democracy. Like, yes. So what's so fascinating about this is that it reminded me, actually, similarly to the interaction on a public social media platform on Twitter that I had with Chrissy Teigen all those years ago. As some of you may know, I wrote a piece about her, calling her out. Now, this was years before her whole cyberbullying scandal came to light, but I saw it back then. I was writing for VH1 and I called her out for it. So she then went to Twitter to come after me and my speech and my opinion, and say something to the effect of, stop policing me. And, we're all entitled to our opinions, that kind of thing. And I said to her, you're right, we are. And isn't that great? It's the same kind of thing, right? It's so funny. They're like, well, we can all disagree, let me live. And I'm like, I'm saying the same thing as you. But it's funny because when it comes down to it, it's like they say this, but actually you can't disagree with them, right? They can have their opinion, but you can't have yours. So much so, and so far to the extent of Chrissy Teigen allegedly calling up my company to have me fired and shut me up. So there you have it, a real 360 moment. Again, just can't help myself with all this stuff. So yes, so this is where, and what Jamila said, I 100% agree in the hypocrisy and the double standard of it all, but there are two sides of it. That's one side of it, and I'm going to get into that later. That's going to be the big shebang, you'll see. But I don't agree with the basis of why they should, like, her arguments and her backup and examples of why this man was a this, a that, a bigot, an ista, all the things, right? I feel are a little bit of a stretch. So I'm not in it. I'm not quite meeting her there, but the general idea of the hypocrisy, yes, I'm there. And also, the fact that I saw the Me Too hypocrisy of these elitists on the red carpet when it was happening for myself, you know, when the whole thing was going down in the black dresses. I mean, I wrote an op-ed about it in Huffington Post, calling out the network E. It's the same similar thing of what she's saying with the Met Gala. At the time, E had all these internal Me Too equality type issues. So it's the Golden Globes, the big bang, the big culmination of celebrities really making this big splash and statement, wearing black dresses in solidarity of survivors, right? I was there. I literally was there on the red carpet. Now you have E, the premier, entertainment news network there, who at the time of all this, in the middle of their own firestorm for all kinds of Me Too, gender equality type issues in their own home. Number one, Ryan Seacrest, their golden boy at the time, had claims against him, totally legitimate claims of Me Too harassment accusations against him. And they still appoint him to be the leading boy on the red carpet to talk to all these celebrities who are, in theory, against the very thing that this guy is being accused of. Also, a pay gap disparity between their male and female hosts, Jason Kennedy and Kat Sadler, which had come to the light. So all these assholes are on this red carpet. No one says a word. No one acknowledges what's going on at their own network. Meanwhile, these celebrities, right, arguably the bigger clowns, with the exception of one or two of them, engage and talk with E as if nothing is going on. Celebrities in their black were more concerned with plugging for 15 seconds, like their new Hallmark movie that no one gave a fuck about, than calling them out. So you're wearing the black, but it's more worth it to you to, promote yourself or your outfit or your show than call them out or not talk to them. It's like, okay, I guess you guys just all have amnesia of why you're here, what you're doing here, and the whole black yay rah rah, hear me loud and proud bit. It just goes to show you how self-involved and narcissistic that they can be. And yeah, to Jamila's point, hypocritical, because at the end of the day, and I said this at the time, what is prancing around in a black dress actually going to solve? If you're not going to be vocal, if you're not going to call these people out, if you're going to let these issues prevail behind the scenes, what is this doing? Absolutely nothing. So just empty activism, virtue signaling. And I called it out. And that's the kind of thing she's talking about here. It's like walk the walk, or in Doja Cat's case, crawl all around town, like whatever you want. Now, before I get into the examples of how people find his comments about, weight, Me Too, but like this goes on. I mean, you can see this really goes on and on. It's like your community college syllabus could never. No, but there were a couple of people that night who threw shade, if you will, at this fashion designer. Apparently, he was known for black and white. Apparently, he hated the color pink. So, Carl, I'm sorry to you today, because the pink is, in fact, popping in more ways than one. But apparently, there were a couple of people like Viola Davis, Naomi Campbell. There was also a Native American singer or artist, I believe, who dressed in pink. And they're saying that this was kind of like to give a jab at him and to spite him again, right? It's kind of like, okay. It reminds me a little bit of the AOC, virtue signaling thing, but whatever, not important enough to really dwell on. But all that goes to say, they're being celebrated for the little jabs there on the carpet. So without further ado, let's get right into what people find so problematic and what I have to say about that, and where we're all going with this in the yellow brick road after all. So what he has said about weight. He has said things like, no one wants to see curvy women. He said this in 2009. He also said, you've got fat mothers with their bags of chips sitting in front of the TV saying that models are ugly. He made comments before about how there were generally more overweight women in the population than anorexic women in terms of their health. He called Heidi Klum heavy once. He said Adele was, quote, a little too fat. And then I guess later amended his statement and said they were actually about Lana Del Rey. And he said that in the world of beautiful clothing, it's all about dreams and illusions. So let's digest this for a second, okay? Like these moms with their Cheetos in front of their Today Show, as Carl said. So first of all, I want to make it clear, there's a part of me that's like giggling and laughing. Like I said, there's a part of that kind of tell it how it is, like give no shits, that I think is some people just kind of get away with it. There is something refreshing about that. Now, with that being said, I do not advocate for what he's saying, right? And maybe that's just his view. Maybe it is just his view that, you know what, this is the world of couture and fashion and, as he said, dreams and illusion and a fantasy. And maybe in his mind, that was for size 0 and size 2. And I just want to say, I've said this before, right? He's allowed to have that view. Now, I don't share that view, but let me lay it down for you. I don't mean to be Dr. Seuss today, but what can I say? Icons will be icons. I don't think that there is no room for, the exclusion. Like there's no room for anyone who's not a 0 or size 2 in this business. I think there is room for everybody, but let's not confuse that with every brand should be everybody. So what do I mean by that? Let's take the iconic Victoria's Secret, right? And how even these people had to be so PC that they had to whitewash their iconic Victoria's Secret angels. Now me, I'm watching this and I know that it's a fantasy. All 5'2" of me, I'm not expecting to look like a Victoria's Secret goddamn supermodel, right? That's the point. It's the brand. It's the legacy. It's what sets it apart. It's the fantasy. I love my friend Amanda Nicole. She's been on the show, a plus size model, right? She as a plus size model is even saying this. She's like, can they just do what they do and let the fantasy exist? Obviously for her as a plus size model, she doesn't think there's no room for plus size models. She's made part of a living from it, right? But it's that idea of like, let the fantasy be fantasy. And it's also the idea of, you know what? If we make every single brand to include every single thing, what makes anyone stand apart? Right? I'm not expecting to look like the Abercrombie models. You guys know I've done a whole thing on Abercrombie. Same thing, as arguably problematic as that brand was too, right? But all that goes to say, I still think there's room for you. The more, the merrier, right? Make it your own. If that's your thing, if it's the curvy, if it's the plus size, if it's the this, the that, there's room under the tent for everyone. So pull up a goddamn picnic table and let's do this shit. Like the more, the merrier. Let's see it. Like bring what you got. I love that. I love that it differentiates everybody and everyone can have their own unique stamp on it. So that's how I feel about it. But again, don't get that twisted where everything has to be with everyone, and that's what I think is a problem with something like this. It's like, let him have his view. Okay. And I have mine and I'm going to create it and I'm going to bring it to the table and I'm going to make it stand on its own. And I don't have to have your view. And you know what? You don't have to take on mine view, but let's bring everyone's out there. I said this in one of my last episodes with Lizzo and the body image, same thing. It's like, she has her idea of body image and I have mine. And that's great. We can both have our respective ones, but I'm not going to force her to have mine. And so she shouldn't force me to have hers, right? It's like live and let live, kumbaya, am I right? It's also worth noting that he himself underwent a 90-pound weight loss in 13 months because he was kind of walking the walk and speaking to, I want to be a man emblematic of, what this is and fashion and how it looks and the visual aspect of it all and actually embody that and be that. So it's also worth noting that he himself underwent this transformation. So clearly he thought it not only about other people, but about himself too, right? So without further ado, let's get into Carl Boy's comments about Me Too. In 2018, he said, if you don't want your pants pulled about, don't become a model. Do you like my interpretive reading? It's going to be joy. It's going to be included with interpretive dance later. So be sure to stick around after the credits. No, to really have a show. He said, then don't become a model. Join a nunnery. There's always a place for you at the convent. The savagery. And then he said, I'm fed up with it. And he also made comments about, how it would take people like 20 years to recollect something and how there were no key witnesses and all this, right? So obviously, Jamila, even in recent posts, has said something to the effect of, completely disrespecting victims and people who survived sexual assault and threw it under the bus and all this, when again, here these people are, doing a whole ode and tribute to him. Now, let's yet again go on a trip, go on a Where's Waldo expedition and unpack this as well, like with your couture or not. Like, I certainly am not wearing couture. I'm not going to tell you where I got this getup, but just know it is some black market shady shit, but it paid off. No. Okay. So this very much reminds me what he's saying. And let's assume, right? He's not blatantly talking about, he's saying, you're a model, you're going to get picked at, comments and kind of probed at and this and that. And is everything laying on you right and looking right and all this and that, right? Let's assume he doesn't actually mean full blown violation, assault, sticking your hand down someone's pants and or rape. Okay. So with that being said, what he's getting at here reminds me a little bit of the Pam Anderson thing, how she got such flack because she came out and said, my mom always taught me never to, go to a, hotel room with an exec, like that kind of thing. Like, what, it's not going to bode well for you. Right. And that whole idea, and obviously she got major blowback. Like that idea, it's like, you kind of know what you're getting. And you know how I feel about this, right? And I'm going to expand on this, but I don't think anyone in no matter what position, I don't care if you're a porn star with your full-blown labia out, okay? Nobody is ever asking for, even if it's a model naked on a, whatever it is, like no one is ever asking for or deserves anything. Like there is a hard line. No is no. And if someone violates that, that's never, ever okay. Someone to abuse their power, to manipulate, to force themselves on you, that's never okay. Point blank, period. But going back to his whole thing and even the Pam Anderson thing, there is an element of, not excusing, again, any of that, but there is an element of the kind of savagery and the environment of being in such a visual business. So I haven't told you guys this, but I actually signed with a modeling agency. So again, like look out, Adriana Lima, like 5 me is coming for your ass. But when I moved to Nashville, right? And even that, I'll tell you, I'm like, you have to have a big self-esteem and a thick skin for this shit, because they don't give a fuck. It'll literally be like, say they're casting a commercial. They're so specific. They literally will be like, okay, we need a 5'5" African-American with green eyes. And if you have one pore here, sorry, you're out. Like, that's just also kind of the nature of it, right? Again, it's showbiz, baby. Like it is visual, and they're going to cut no corners on that shit, just like Carl isn't going to cut you from a 2 to a 6. Like he's just not going to do it. Sorry. So this is where I also want to make the distinction, right? And I think that this often gets lost in the dialogue, is distinguishing what I was just getting at, a comment or something of that nature versus actually me tooing somebody. And I have the best example with yet again another celebrity when I was up close in the flesh with Morgan Freeman, iconic actor. So here's what happened. I'm sitting around a table with other reporters, and Morgan Freeman comes and sits right doggone next to me, okay, for this press event. And this middle-aged lady who's already trying to take over the moment starts asking her question, like barreling through all of us. And cutting her off, right, mid-question, he looks at me and is bewildered by my jeans. Now, these jeans are a thing, right? They're giving like that iconic Abercrombie Hollister ripped up 2000s moment. And he looks at them mid-question of this lady and says, well, that's strategic, right? Referring to the skin showing through my jeans. So I kind of jest and jab right back at him. I'm like, what? You're not a fan? Like, you don't have a pair of your own? And he's like, well, are you crazy? So really fun moment. I ended up getting on camera as he was getting up to leave. I say to him, Morgan, you know, parting ways, is there something that you want to say about my jeans? And he looks at them and looks at me and he says, wear them, baby. And we high five and the whole room laughs. So this was picked up by The Blast, which is a TMZ like outlet. And they paint this as a very Me Too villainizing Morgan Freeman moment, literally headlining it. Morgan Freeman objectifies female reporter. And even the language of the story, they're like, he obviously was a fan of the jeans, you know, the way he raised his eyebrows and cut off the lady asking him a question and, you know, provoking this young woman dressed as any LA woman next to him, right? So very much painting this picture. I wrote an op-ed about this in Playboy. That's where it's like, can we draw a line? Like, first of all, I'm having a good time. Nothing was inappropriate. Secondly, if something was said that was inappropriate, like, I got this. Like, I can handle myself. Like, I can put a motherfucker in place. You know what I mean? Again, that's different than someone with my unwanted attention groping me, right? Which is never okay. Don't put your hands on me. You can look, but don't touch, you know, the old rule. And I also feel like things like this, yet again, don't do any service to actual survivors who reasonably so are fighting to get their voices and their stories really heard. So the fact that they categorize me as a Me Too victim by Morgan Freeman, because at the time there were other women coming out with accusations against him, to put me in that same camp is, quite frankly, is and was pathetic. How dare you call me a Me Too victim when I wouldn't even say that about myself? I feel like we never separate the two. And that's why it gets into really murky territory. Even when I talk about before, I've always liked the Pam Anderson thing. Now I can always advocate for a woman to have the wherewithal, you know, maybe don't go into the exec's hotel room today. Maybe don't go down a dark alley by yourself at night. It's not me giving men any excuses like, oh, men will just do what they do, deal with it. It's living in the reality of the world we're in, right? And really arming yourself with the tools to just be smart and to not have bad shit happen. You know, it's a sad reality of the world we're in. We're going to get to a better place, everybody. But in the meantime, being cognizant enough and drawing that line for yourself, right? And that same thing goes for this. So it's like when people say things or make comments, especially in the entertainment, acting, modeling business, again, I just think that there's a hard line between getting something said about you, and again, in which case you could always put them in place 100%, and them actually crossing the line and touching you or doing something unacceptable like that. And I'm not saying that verbal sexual harassment doesn't hurt or isn't a real thing. I know it's absolutely a real thing. I'm just saying we have to be a little bit clearer here as what pertains to what. Someone who actually has really walked that line well in this whole sphere is Pam Anderson, right? It's that idea of what I was getting at before. Like, she had the big, huge fake tits in your face 24/7. Like, E.T. did not want a phone home. He wanted a phone onto those silicone planets of glory, right? And whenever someone would make a comment about them, right? Because again, they're out there, they're in your face. She didn't get all disgruntled. She handled it with such wit, gave it back to them, and was almost expecting it, but turned it around and handled it like a boss, right? So I feel like that's someone who walked that line really well. And that's where, again, it goes into almost like the gaslighting of what we see now all the time with celebrities, like say a Lizzo, who is obviously so out there, so in your face, on the extreme side of it. And yet when she gets remarks, it's like shocking to her. It's like, how could you? It's almost like, well, come on now. Like, you're putting it out there for everybody. How do you expect everyone not to react? Right. So Pam Anderson was a really good example, again, of someone who walked that line. And people like the hardcore Me Too crusaders will say, they'll combat this and they'll say, well, saying things and locker room talk and boys will be boys is the exact same thing. And it's the same environment as actual assault or rape or groping. And that's where it's like, you know, again, we have to draw a line. I know that there, of course, is gray, but it's like I can think about robbing a bank all day long, but until I actually do it, that's a different story, right? So it's that idea. So all that goes to say, you know, maybe take what Karl Lagerfeld is saying about all this with a grain of salt. All right. it doesn't maybe have to be that serious. Okay, lastly, a comment he made, and this was deemed, a bigot and anti-immigrant, right? Just touching on this quickly, is in 2017, he criticized Germany for opening its borders. He actually called it anti-Semitic, having the backs of Jews, my peeps, because he said one cannot, even if there are decades between, kill millions of Jews so you can bring millions of their worst enemies in their place. And this got a lot of flack, especially from, liberals like Jamila, because they see it as anti-Muslim, anti-immigrant. And it's like, again, it's that idea of like causes eating themselves again, but it's like, yet again, just throw Jews under the bus. It's fine. Like, don't worry about us, right? Because in the name of, and this is coming from a daughter of an immigrant. Okay. But so obviously I'm pro immigration, but it's like, again, like they have to fiercely stand by one. So it's like, sorry to the Jews, can't be anti-immigration or anti-Muslim today. Like everything has to be all or nothing, right? So maybe there's validity in what he's saying there, but nonetheless, he is a bigot according to them, right? Because can't be looking anti-immigration over here. So let's conclude the class, everybody. Now that I laid it on thick for you today, my number one conclusion from this, okay, is what I said earlier, is that not everything has to always be for everyone. That wouldn't even separate us or make anything interesting. In fact, if everything has everyone, everything would be the same, and that shit is boring, okay? So stop it and knock it off. But in that vein, let's own that. Let's own that not everything is for everyone all the time. So what do I mean? When it comes to all this cancel culture, selective canceling, double standards, let's own that not everything is for everyone and stop with the canceling nonsense. Because the truth of the matter is, again, while I think Jamila wants Karl Lagerfeld to burn in hell without his couture, little pitchfork there with Satan, I do agree that some of the examples of reasons why people have gotten canceled are absolutely absurd and ridiculous. You know what I mean? I mean, James Gunn, the director of Guardians of the Galaxy, has unearthed tweets. Are they jokes? Yeah. Are they bad jokes? Yeah. Jokes about like touching little boys and the Holocaust and all this kind of shit got him fired from Guardians of the Galaxy. Again, they're just not good jokes, but anyway, Chris Harrison, right, makes a comment, again, off color, no pun intended, distasteful about Rachel Lindsay about, race and The Bachelor. Again, annihilated, fired. Let's not forget, okay, the editor-in-chief of Bon Appetit, a resurfaced photo of him dressed as I think a Puerto Rican. So it was a version of like brown face or black face, gets fired from Bon Appetit. Like, okay, it's fine. I just wanted to know how to roast a turkey today, but cool. That guy's career is gone. And how could we forget? But J.K. Rowling, who voices fair and, as she's entitled to, opinions about women's rights and the trans movement and all this, and is, in the flames of Hogwarts hell, right? God forbid anyone even mutter her name in Hollywood. So what does this show me? I mean, I think back and I'm thinking to myself, so does Jamila, even though she's calling this out and she says in her thing, this isn't about cancel culture, it's just about all this hypocrisy and double standard. Does she want cancel culture or not? My guess is she actually does want to uphold it, because by her view, it's like, let's not give this guy the time of day. Let's boycott, right? And it's the famous line too. Someone in light of all this who's connected to the Met said, we're not doing this because, or promoting this because Karl's quote, values don't align with ours, right? They love that line, the values don't align. So my guess is someone like a Jamila would want to uphold this round and round. I think what she's saying is, right, it's like we have some cancellation over here and not over here. So it's like, be consistent, like do it across the board then. I'm on the other end of it. Instead of be consistent, right? It's like you do it or you don't. I just say don't at all, right? Again, stop the nonsense, because that is the truth of how ridiculous some of these cancel culture examples are. And with all that being said, lastly, and I want to give you a really great example, you know, she talks about in her post separating art from the artist. And she says, you know, how convenient that we don't do it with him, but we do it with other people. And that's something that I really want to tie this all together with in the end, right? Is the complexity and the complicated nature, not only of all of us, but of artists. People said that of him. They were like, even though he was a reverend and gave no shits, they're like, we don't even know if he believed this. Maybe he did, but he was just here to kind of provoke and bring a rise out of people. Ironically, with Jamil does too, right? But perhaps my favorite example of this, and this I had to dig so I could find, right? But what does that say? So in 1993, he actually had a famous Italian porn star walk in Fashion Week with strippers for a Fendi show, wearing bathing suits, right? Because his reasoning was like, they're so simple, these bathing suits, like anyone could carry them. Like they could be on a mannequin. They could be like, that's how, you know, they stand on their own. So giving a platform to people like sex workers, which was so provocative at the time that Anna Wintour, okay, all of these celebs sucking her non-existent fashion penis, okay, Anna Wintour was so disgruntled and upset by this that apparently she walked out because it was so offensive to her. Like she literally walked out in the middle of the show seeing this, right? And I thought, how interesting, like giving, like you would think that is so like liberal and forward thinking to give sex workers the platform at the most like polished prestige display Fashion Week, right? On the catwalk. And that's what really, you know, it's funny. It's like, where's that in all the coverage, right? Because people love skewering him. The things calling him all kinds of names are a dime a dozen all the pieces. But it really got me thinking. It's like, that's the artist's role, right? Is to provoke, whether it be comedians or writers or artists. That's what their job is. Like, we should all want that. Even the Jamilas of the world, even if it's uncomfortable or if we don't agree, it's important and it's good. And that's exactly what we need, right? For forward thinking. Otherwise, we're looking at a good old authoritarian, you know, regime here where all art and thinking has to fit their little boxes of what that looks like. In which case we're looking at literally like black and white comics about the grass. Good luck with that. So with all that being said, when you think about it, it's like, again, we don't have to adopt everyone's mindset and how they feel, but let's bring all of ours to the table and celebrate the fact that we do have this array of expression, of opinion, of art without trying to cancel, censor, shut people up, make everyone fit in this neat little uncancelable PC box, right? Because at the end of the day, isn't that what inclusion is? Something to think about.